Thanks everybody for coming to Getting to Smiley Face, Elevating UX in the Enterprise. I should point out this is a historic occasion because this is probably, I think, maybe, the first time that an emoji has ever been used in a conference session title. So consider yourself part of history. My name is Shaun Wortis. I'm Senior Director of Product Design at Pega, and with me is Amos Wagon, who's Director of UX at Pega. And today we're going to talk about the topic of elevating UX and customer end-to-end experience in the enterprise.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you all for coming today, and I know that there are great technology sessions out there, and you chose us. But we all know that technology has a single purpose, and that's serving the needs of the user, and that's why we're all here. But before we dive into enterprise in the UX, let's take a journey through time and examine the evolution of UX and see how it impacts us today with software UX in general. So, is this going to work? Let's point on this.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. So it all started with a guy named Alan. Not this Alan, this Alan. So he built the first computer. Actually, it was not the first computer. It could do only a single function. But the Colossus was probably the first programmable computer. And its users needed to use switches and buttons to key in very specific instructions for this computer to work. And they had to remember it, and they had to know exactly how the machine works and what language the machine speaks and understands in order to communicate with it. With that, Alan Turing started the era of computer-human interaction. Alan Turing, of course, also developed some of the key concepts that follow us to this day of modern computing and AI, and we're going to see how it impacts computer-human interaction to this day. The next step of the evolution we see in the invention of programming languages, and Fortran was the first in the 50s. And unlike Colossus, when the users had to remember exactly what switch to operate and they understood how computers work, here you don't need to understand how computers work and think. You need to just memorize some syntax, and using plain alphanumeric characters and even simple English words, you can program something into a computer that once it runs, it will automatically translate it into its machine language. So we can see some progression into this with this abstraction of a simpler and easier way to interact with computers. And not just that, this is not machine-specific anymore. Users could use Fortran or any programming language on any computer. So taking a giant leap forward, we see the next step in the evolution of UX with, not this even, this. So the first graphical user interface was developed by Park, which was the famous research arm of Xerox. And they took what programming was before and took it a step forward. So now users didn't need to memorize all these specific syntax. They got visible cues on the screen of the specific functions. And they took it even a step further, and using physical metaphors, they created a very easy to learn language to communicate with computers. So using windows and icons and trash cans and calculator, users knew exactly how to interact with this computer, and they could do fairly complex tasks that obviously are far superior, far much more complex than the early machines. So we see with every evolution, every step in this evolution, it's easier and easier to use computers, and computers are getting smarter and smarter and more understanding of human behaviors. Now with the graphical user interface, its users could no longer really use keyboards as an input device. So coincidentally, the same research arm at Xerox invented the mouse. So graphical user interface was obviously adopted by the early computers of Xerox Star and obviously the Macintosh. And now we jump a big step forward into the release of the iPhone. So in 2007, when Steve Jobs unveiled the first iPhone, he promised that it will be a leapfrog product and it will change the landscape of smartphones forever. And not just he delivered on this promise, he changed the landscape of computer interaction forever. And the genius of the iPhone is not by any invention of technology. The technology of touchscreen was available since the 60s. With the iPhone, the fusion of superior hardware and superior software created an experience that was super intuitive and very natural to the users. So users using touch and gestures could interact now with the device. And we all remember around that time, YouTube was filled with videos of grandmas and toddlers swiping and pinching. And actually, we couldn't resist, so we have something short here to show. Oh, so this is a bit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is pretty amazing how easily humans can now interact with computers. And this takes us a step forward to 2011, where Siri was released by Apple. And Siri was not the first virtual assistant, but it was the first to reach masses. And shortly after Siri was released, Microsoft and Google followed. And in 2014, Amazon released the Echo, which was the first device. But here, there's obviously a big step forward where the screen is completely eliminated, and even the physical inputs are completely eliminated from the computers, and we just simply and very naturally can speak to the devices. And the technology not just understands our speech, the technology also understands our intents. And from the days of switches and buttons to punch cards and, oh my God, and code.
I'll just use
this clicker, I think I'm gonna. Yeah. So from the days of switches and punch cards and codes and graphical user interface, the evolution is very clear. Computers become more and more smarter, but in order to reduce friction from the users. So in the past, users needed to completely understand how humans needed to completely understand how computers think and talk in order to communicate with them. But as computers evolve, now we communicate with computers much more naturally and in a much more humane way. And when we are thinking about the future, so where the future will take us, it's unclear, but the direction, I think, is quite clear today, because computers will continue to adapt and predict our needs. And ideas like touchless technology or zero UI and artificial intelligence are becoming mainstream now. And we don't know where it will go, but very much like the Green Lantern, who is a DC superhero. He has this magical ring of power. This ring of power understands his intents and predicts exactly what he needs and give him the best tool for the best situation. So this is where we see human-computer interaction going, not to the ring itself, but to computers understanding us even more. And pivoting here from the future into the current situation of UX, and especially UX in the enterprise, we see, for the most part, a grim landscape. So we see applications that look like this and behave as they look. And we know that for many organizations have improved a lot the customer-facing user interfaces, but we can still, for the most part, we can see these user interfaces. But consumer application, on the other hand, get great user experience, and they're very easy to learn and very easy to operate. And we ask the question, why is it that consumer applications have great user experiences while enterprise applications lag behind? And one of the possible reasons can be maybe consumer applications handle much simpler problems. So let's look at Uber, for example. With Uber, a user can order a ride, can track in real time what vehicle is coming to pick them up, who is the driver, the color of the vehicle. They can see it all on the map. They can pay securely, and they do all of this with just 3 clicks. Uber interacts with several systems and several technologies. Uber is definitely not a simple use case to solve. So if it's not the complexity of the problem, what is it in consumer applications that they demand such great user experiences? And we believe the reason is in the level of commitment that users have with the applications. So if you think about your interaction with consumer applications and services, if you are not satisfied with the experience, you just disconnect, you uninstall, you switch service. But with enterprise application, it's a little bit more difficult. And we know that customers, they choose the banking or the insurance company. They don't do it because of their software. They do it for other reasons. And even worse, employees never choose their software. And employees are forced to use the software that the enterprise chooses for them. And they actually pay for them to use it no matter how bad they are. So Adam talked about this morning a little bit. One of the biggest challenges that we see in organization moving forward in creating great user experiences is the silos in the organizations. So organizations are siloed, front end and front office and back office are siloed, technology is siloed. And these silos are imposed on the customer, and they create disjointed, inconsistent user experiences. And organizations typically focus on tasks or problem solving. And in fact, if you think about it, many organizations would start a project by saying something like, let's build a mobile app, or let's build a chatbot. They don't really focus on the end-to-end experience, or on the journey, or on the outcome that the customer would like to achieve. So while organizations are lagging behind and they can't really, they are not geared into creating great customer experiences, the customers do expect organizations to provide them with better, faster, and easier way to interact with them. And in the web self-service domain, we see that on average, it takes 30 seconds for a person to get a human operator on the phone, via chat, and 2 minutes on the phone, and a little bit more via social and email. And these are actually pretty good numbers, but still 75% of consumers would complain that this is way too slow. And in this space, we see 4 trends that will continue to impact the web service specifically, but any consumer interaction with an organization in the future. And the first trend is speed. This is obvious. Perception change, customer expectations change, and what was fast yesterday is not fast enough today. And in fact, if you ask consumers, they would say that valuing their time is the most critical aspect of any great customer service. The next trend that we see is that normal business hours no longer apply. So we don't expect to interact with brands and companies between 9 to 5 anymore. We expect them to be constantly available, and this brings the demands from organization to a much higher level of engagement. The third trend is e-commerce. So we all purchase online, and purchase online works really well for us. So it's just natural for consumers to expect to interact with organizations in the same exact way online, and they also consumers expect an organization to have any other service embedded within the overall journey that this customer has with the company. The fourth one is called liquid expectation. And what is liquid expectations? Is when a brand is no longer compared with other brands in its industry. So a vehicle company, we don't compare them with another vehicle company. We compare them with the best-in-class companies there. So we expect our local barbershop to provide the same level of service as Amazon. And so these forces are pushing organizations to provide them with much better, much more cohesive end-to-end experiences.
So the question is what to do, right? We know that you're all here to get some ideas on how to elevate UX in your organizations, because this is obviously critical. So we have 3 suggested tracks that we're going to talk about. The first is awareness, the second is process, and the third is a design system, and we'll go over each of these. So awareness is really education, and the first part about this is building a shared vision. This is critical. We actually heard a little bit of it from the woman from Aflac, I thought, today, which was really fascinating. But the question I would have for all of you is, If you took all of your dev teams and all of your designers and all of your stakeholders and you put them in a room, would they agree on what they're all trying to do? Can they all describe what success actually looks like? Can you state something like, our goal as a company is to make people feel that banking is easier to do than shopping for groceries? Or that we're going to produce the quickest and easiest way to create and fulfill a claim? Because those are outcomes, and it's critical to have that vision that is outcome specific. Otherwise, no one quite knows what they're building for. So I actually love Audi's design, innovation, and the joy of driving. It's a marketing term, but I would not be surprised if they have it on the walls in their offices as well. Because it describes to their designers, their engineers, even the folks putting the cars together on the assembly line, what the point of the company is, what they're trying to do, the joy of driving. It doesn't actually prescribe horsepower or what kind of suspension. It just simply says, we're trying to make something for our customer that is joyful. I love that. We can do this using so-called design thinking methods. And we heard today that Pega is announcing the Pega Catalyst program. This is a new program that that our services organization is going to be driving, where they'll go to work with our customers to help drive outcome-based success with Pega applications. But design thinking is a method for defining the correct problem before you invest. And I think this is actually the hardest thing to do in enterprise software, defining the correct problem. It works by framing deliverables as about outcomes, as about better outcomes, specifically for customers, rather than as features or technology. So I'm going to talk more about the Pega Catalyst program tomorrow at this time in room 118 with Baruch Sachs, who's actually going to lead it. And we'll talk a bit about the program. I can tell you that according to Forrester, that companies that are using design thinking methodologies are showing incredible results, 2 times faster to market, and amazing reduced design time and dev time. The next part of this awareness track is about building a common language. So maybe you've already figured out that high-level vision. Now you have to have a language upon which to describe what you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. What I find is that when I visit digital service companies that are our customers, like Facebook and Google, I'm amazed, in a good way, when I talk to developers there, how often they use the word experience. It's said all the time. Let me see that experience. This is the experience we came up with, et cetera. This is something that you can actually do in your organizations, which is just start using the word experience. When a team comes in looking to show you progress on some work, say, can I see that experience? How does that fit into our end-to-end experience? It's an easy thing, but it's very, very powerful. We also need to learn to research in the correct way. We want to avoid sort of what we call front-loading of research and design. And that sounds maybe funny coming from a designer. I'm telling you, don't do too much design up front. What we want to do is continually learn if what we're doing right now is worth it, and then how to proceed. So there's a guy named Jeff Goffel who wrote the book called Lean UX. It's a great book. And he came to talk to us at Pega a while back. He told a story about when he was a designer for a job-searching website that was focused for executives. And this was during the recession. And one day, the CEO woke up and had a great idea, which was to provide all of their customers on the website with a job-searching coach, personal coach. And they researched it, and they researched it right up front, a lot of research. And then they went and started building this program, and it took a year. Now, meanwhile, what happened was the economies changed, and by the end of it, they weren't able to hire experienced job coaches. So they decided instead to hire folks just out of college. They would give them a mobile phone, give the mobile phone number to the customer, and the program was a complete disaster. And the reason is because, it seems sort of obvious now, but a 55-year-old out-of-work executive has absolutely no interest in advice from a 22-year-older. So this could have been understood at any time had they continually researched, and they literally did nothing. So I think that's a scary story, and the company almost went out of business. But I think we really need to focus on the continual learning piece. So we have a vision. We start to come up with a common language on how to describe these things. And now we have to have a solid UX process. At Pega, we obviously firmly believe in agile methodologies, and we do with our design as well. Agile dictates that requirements and solutions evolve through collaboration in a cross-functional team, and that it be end-user focused. So the goal here is to restate the work as about outcomes, not technology. So something like two-factor authentication. Probably many of you have been asked, or were asked, to provide two-factor authentication to customers. If the project is framed as two-factor authentication, that's about technology. But if instead it's framed as we want to provide the best possible security for our customers, or we want to prevent our customers from resetting their passwords over and over again, then what happens is the work becomes more about the entire experience. So maybe we fix little bits and pieces that we wouldn't have noticed if we had simply framed it as a piece of technology. And then also there's this. In a couple years, when two-factor authentication, and it is kind of clumsy, right, is not the most ideal way of securing a login, then you can roll your work continually, iteratively, into a new piece of technology. The other piece to a solid UX process is about metrics, knowing when you've succeeded. So last year, Amos and I talked at Pegaworld about the Pega-U metrics. Those are 4 O's. And I think they're super valuable. This is how we actually drive product internally at Pega. So these are all measurable, quantifiably measurable. The first O is onboarding, which is training. So the question is, how much time does it take for a new user to learn a specific task? So that's something you can actually measure with a stopwatch, and then see if you can iteratively get that number down. The second O is operation, which is productivity, efficiency, accuracy. So how much time it takes to perform, for somebody who already knows the app, how much time does it take to perform X number of tasks, or a certain task, or how many points of error, et cetera, measurable. The third O in the U metrics is observation, which is really about how many times are certain operations even being performed at all.